start recording. Okay. So hello, my name is Tin, and I will be doing my blog post project on the effects of social media influencers on advertising. I have here Professor Esther Thorson. She is the Professor of Journalism and Associate Dean for Graduate Studies at Michigan State University. Thank you so much for joining me on this interview.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. Starting off, I would like to ask, why are social media influencers an integral part to marketing corporate brands in this day and age? And what do you think started this trend?
Well, we've always known that interpersonal communication is very effective with people, and perhaps it's even more effective than mediated communication. So what influencers bring to persuasion is, although they're mediated, so you meet them on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, but they seem like real people to you. So that what's called the parapsychology of their relationship to you is much more powerful than it would be in an ordinary ad, where it's created and it's fixed and it looks like it's fixed. It doesn't look like a real person. So it's that the bringing of the interpersonal relationship between the audience member and the influencer that is the key to very powerful persuasion.
Okay. And do you think that this became more prominent due to social media being on the rise?
Yes, certainly. I mean, social media are so dominant in our society that they control essentially 85 to 90% of all advertising. So if all advertising moves into social media, then that's a perfect environment for the advertisers to start to use influencers to impact how persuasive their messages are to us. But I do want to say that it's also the case that we have always known that interpersonal communication enhances, it adds to the persuasion that comes from a mediated message. For example, we know that when people hear a political message, if they're able to talk with each other about it, the interpersonal, the message actually has a greater effect than without that interpersonal.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see. And my next question would be that, is it important for social media influencers to disclose their sponsorship? Would that result in a more positive message or a negative message?
Well, it's a legal requirement from the Federal Trade Commission that they do disclose if they are receiving payment or in-kind exchanges for doing what they're doing. In other words, they can't receive anything from an advertiser without disclosing it. Does it harm the persuasive effect? Yes, it does. As soon as part of what we showed and many other people have shown as well, as soon as you disclose, oh, I'm being paid by Nike to tell you that they make the world's best tennis shoes, then the message is not as effective.
And when companies are building their brand reputation using social media influencers, do you think the influencers themselves are also building their image and brand in return through these companies?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's why they do it. You know, the more followers they have, which is enhancing their own brand, the more advertisers pay them for endorsing their products. So, I mean, and part of the problem is that you have human beings endorsing all kinds of disgusting and horrible stuff online in order to enhance their brand. So they essentially make more money.
Right. Yeah. And just sort of adding on to what you were saying, these days, influencers tend to, for example, advertise betting sites or gambling or sort of scams and fads that are harmful towards even their young viewers. Do you think that has what kind of effect does that have towards advertising in general?
Well, I mean, influencers are very powerful people, and that's why I think in the United States, as well as certainly in Europe and probably other countries beyond, there is such a large discussion about how these kinds of messages need to be more strictly regulated. For example, some influencers basically use their own children as examples of what they're sharing with people. So they share all kinds of personal things that the child would never once shared if they were old enough to know what was going on. I just read a case where an influencer was, took their 5-year-old to a sex shop and then videoed it. And of course, gained a whole lot of viewers, probably including pedophiles, right? Which increased their audience, but to the cost of that child and to the cost of anybody that watched that particular example of an influencer. And so that needs to be regulated. That needs to be off of Facebook, off of Instagram, off of YouTube, etc. Influencers are, they need not have full freedom to behave in that kind of way that damages people, damages audience, and maybe damages people that they happen to be talking about, for example, their own children.
Right. Yeah. And are social media influencers here to stay for the foreseeable future? Although it's very hard in this day and age to imagine a time without social media. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're certainly very powerful and they're certainly very effective. It's easy to imagine an effective government managing to regulate them in such a way that they're no longer useful to advertisers. I mean, that's the only way I can see of getting rid of them. And some of them are okay. I mean, I think for a lot of people, let's say young adolescent girls, an influencer that tells them, how to dress and be cool and wear makeup, it's probably not damaging. Use Maybelline or use whatever brand. On the other hand, there's just a lot of damage that influencers do. And so I think the question, will they last? Yeah, they'll last unless or until the government manages to regulate out the societally damaging part of what they do.
Okay. And upon conducting your research about social media influencers, what surprised you the most?
Well, it surprised me that we were able to, we simulated influencers, so they weren't real people, but we were able to show that they could actually say things to their audience that even though they did disclose their message, it didn't have that damaging effect of persuasion. So a smart influencer can essentially say, oh yes, I'm being paid to say this, but do that in such a way that people are still persuaded by that individual. I mean, we found that fairly frightening, but interesting that you can do it. I mean, it shows you the power of interpersonal relationships, right?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay. And in the future, would more social media influencers will there be more social media influencers, or do you think that another form of advertising will sort of rival the because right now on social media, all you see are all these internet celebrities. They're all just talking about a brand all the time or something that you're using. And it seems like that is like the most dominant form of advertising right now.
Well, it's very common. There's no question about it. But certainly more generally, social media is absorbing the vast majority of advertising dollars. And so that is a problem for our society, right? Because number one, it killed newspapers, right? With quality news, that's a big problem for us. Number two, many people argue that social media like Facebook have way too much power. When they went down for 5 or 6 hours last week, entire countries had no way to get on the internet. That's too much power. That's too much monopolization. It's monopolization of the power to communicate, and it's monopolization of advertising, and that needs to stop, right? That needs to be, government needs to step in and make that stop. If they are able to do that, influencers will continue to be influential. I mean, let's think about it this way. If I'm a National Basketball Association basketball star, I don't need to be an influencer on Facebook in order to have an impact. All I have to do is say, I'm not going to get vaccinated, right? and it's covered in the news and I become an influencer.
Yeah.
So there'll always be that kind of thing, right? There'll always be people who are admired, loved, respected, who will say things, and that message will travel out and it will impact how people think about things. So that is the basic general concept of an influencer. Will we always have influencers? Yes, we will. Will they always be tied to social media? I don't know. I don't think they'll be tied quite as tight if we can get control over the dangerous impact that social media has on people, countries, democracies, etc.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Professor. Those are all my questions. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we close out this interview?
No, I appreciated meeting you, and I hope some people get to listen to your blog.
Yep. Yes, Professor. So these are all my questions. Thank you so much. I'm just gonna end the recording right here.